Pros, save more on the materials you need to get the job done inside and out at Lowe's. Right now, get 10% off in-stock Trex Naturals decking, now available in more styles. Plus, get 15% off select custom entry, interior, and storm doors. Then, we'll deliver it all straight to your job site to help keep your jobs moving. Get the brands pros trust, priced right, and ready when you need them. Our best lineup is here at Lowe's. Valid through 5/27. While supplies last. Selection varies by location.
Have you ever attended one of those just incredibly inspiring workplace workshops? You know the ones?
Oh, yeah. The ones where you walk into a hotel conference room or maybe log into some really slick virtual seminar.
Exactly. The speaker is like incredibly engaging. The slide deck is pristine. You've got your brand new notebook taking meticulous notes.
Feeling totally energized by the end of the day.
Hey, you are going to change the way you work forever. But then, well, then the following Tuesday morning rolls around.
The Tuesday morning reality check.
Yep. Your inbox is just overflowing. 3 clients are upset, and you catch yourself doing things the exact same old way you always have. Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are exploring a massive, often invisible problem in the professional world.
And it really is invisible to most leadership.
It is. We're looking at why we forget or, fail to apply what we learn, and much more importantly, the hidden mechanics of how to actually fix it.
The scope of this problem is just staggering. And to get to the bottom of it, we are going to look at a really illuminating research brief by Dr. Jonathan H. Westover. It's called Beyond the Classroom, Turning Workplace Training into Organizational Capability.
And this brief is so powerful because it heavily synthesizes a major 2025 mixed method study, right? By Maynor, Rothenbush, and Kaufeld.
Yeah, exactly. While also pulling from decades of industrial organizational psychology. I mean, it completely dismantles how most companies think about learning.
And the numbers they present right at the top they're a huge wake-up call for anyone listening.
They really are. The data shows that only about 30% of training content is meaningfully applied at work.
Wait, 30%?
Just 30. Meaning we're losing a massive 70% of organizational learning into the void.
Wow. Whenever I hear that, I immediately think about the classic New Year's resolution trap.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Right. Like, we focus entirely on the initial hype and the enthusiasm of the event itself. We go out, we buy the expensive new gym shoes, we post our goals online, draft the perfect schedule.
Getting the aesthetic right.
Exactly. We throw all our energy into the starting line, completely ignoring that Tuesday morning reality check when the alarm goes off at 5 a.m., the floor is freezing, and, the motivation has just totally vanished.
The New Year's resolution parallel is incredibly apt, honestly, because the failure point is identical. And the cost of this, what the researchers term weak transfer, it's immense.
Because it's not like you see a line item on the budget for this. Right?
No, you will rarely see failed training application on a corporate budget, but the organization is always paying the toll.
How so?
Well, they pay it through elevated error rates, through stalled innovations, because people just won't adopt new software, and through thousands of wasted hours.
So the direct investment is basically lost.
Yeah, the instructor fees, the software licenses, the raw hours employees spend away from their core tasks, it generates a dismal return. But the indirect costs, like an entire department failing to adapt to a critical regulatory shift, that can threaten the whole business.
Right. So if the failure rate is 70% and the financial bleeding is that obvious, why does this massive drop-off happen in the first place? It feels like, something we should have solved by now.
You'd think so. But the drop-off happens because organizations fundamentally misunderstand the mechanics of how learning actually travels through a workplace.
Okay, what do you mean by how it travels?
Well, the traditional and ultimately flawed paradigm views training as an isolated individual concern. The logic goes, you send an employee to a classroom, you pour knowledge into their head like water into a pitcher.
And then they just walk back to their desk and execute it.
Right. That's the expectation. But a single trained employee, no matter how fired up they are on a Friday afternoon, rarely possesses the leverage to shift an entire organizational system on Monday.
Okay, let's unpack this. If I go to a training seminar and I learn a brilliant new shortcut for our database software, and I start using it at my desk, I'm naturally going to show the person in the cubicle next to me, right?
That's the assumption.
Yeah. I mean, isn't knowledge sharing just an automatic, natural byproduct of individual transfer?
What's fascinating here is that the data explicitly proves that sharing is not a natural byproduct at all.
It's not.
Not at all. The 2025 study by Maynor and colleagues tracked over 500 employees, And it revealed that there are two distinct parallel paths that occur after a training event.
Okay, two paths. What are they?
The first path is training transfer. That is the act of taking classroom theory and applying it to your own individual Tuesday morning tasks.
Right, so using the shortcut myself.
Exactly. But the second path is knowledge sharing. That is the deliberate active diffusion of that newly acquired competence across your network of colleagues.
Wait, are you saying someone can be highly successful at the first path but completely fail at the second?
Precisely. The researchers found that while transfer and sharing are, operationally intertwined in a busy office, conceptually, they are entirely distinct behaviors driven by different internal mechanisms.
Okay, I think I see. So back to the database shortcut example.
Right. You might quietly use that shortcut to finish your own work an hour earlier. That is successful transfer.
Because I'm applying it.
Yes. But pausing your work, calling your colleague over, and spending 20 minutes teaching them the shortcut, that requires a completely different type of effort and social risk.
Oh, that makes so much sense. I have to actively decide to stop my own work to help someone else.
Exactly. And the critical finding from those 537 employees is that both of these paths independently predict job performance and overall job satisfaction.
Independent of each other.
Yes. So if an organization only measures whether an individual applies the training to their own desk, which, let's be honest, is what almost all companies do, they're vastly underestimating the true value of the training.
Because they're completely blind to the sharing pathway.
Exactly.
Wow. That really reframes the entire goal of sending someone to a workshop. You aren't just paying to upgrade their individual skills, you are theoretically paying them to become a distribution node for those skills.
That's a great way to put it.
But if transferring the skill and sharing the skill are distinct paths that both require effort, what actually compels a busy, stressed-out employee to walk down either of them?
To understand that internal drive, the research leans heavily on the Rubicon model of action phases. This was developed by psychologists Otziger and Goldwitzer.
The Rubicon model.
Right. And this model makes a vital distinction between two distinct psychological states, motivation and volition.
I have to admit, those sound like interchangeable corporate buzzwords.
Yeah.
How does industrial psychology actually separate motivation from volition?
It's a difference between wanting to do something and actually fighting through the friction to get it done.
Oh.
Motivation captures the intention to act. It is that burst of enthusiasm you and listener feel when leaving a great workshop. You intend to use the new project management framework.
Right, the new notebook energy.
Exactly. And for most trainers and instructional designers, getting the employee highly motivated is the finish line. They pack up their slides and go home.
Mission accomplished, right.
But volition captures your persistence in carrying out that intention when real-world obstacles arise.
Right, the Tuesday morning reality check we talked about.
Exactly. The Rubicon model argues that intentions simply die in the action phase without volition. A highly motivated colleague who lacks volition will abandon the new behavior the very second they face a minor software glitch.
Or like a competing demand from a client.
Or a looming deadline, yeah. Crossing the Rubicon means moving from the theoretical desire to the gritty, persistent execution.
So if volition is the missing ingredient, how do leaders actually design for it? My immediate fear is that designing for persistence just turns into aggressive micromanagement, where managers are demanding status updates on new skills every 4 hours.
It shouldn't look like micromanagement at all, actually. The brief highlights a brilliant, real-world case study of a pharmaceutical company rolling out a complex regulatory training program.
Okay, what did they do?
Instead of demanding flawless execution and hoping people push through the dense material, they instituted a very targeted, low-pressure check-in exactly 2 weeks after the training ended.
2 weeks later.
Right. Supervisors simply asked 2 questions. What did you try? And what got in the way?
Oh, wow. What did you try? That is such a subtle but massive shift in expectations. They aren't asking, did you perfectly execute the new regulation protocol without any errors?
Exactly. By focusing on the attempt, they completely normalize the friction that volition is meant to overcome.
Because everyone is going to hit friction.
Right. And when a company asks what got in the way, they are actively acknowledging that the workplace is a messy, chaotic environment, and that obstacles are a guarantee, not a personal failure.
That specific psychological framing removes the shame of stumbling on the first try. It nudges employees out of passive intention and into active, iterative problem solving.
It really does. But here is the catch. Individual internal drive, that volition, is exhausting to maintain in a vacuum.
Mm.
It requires the right social environment to survive. Which brings us to the most surprising finding in the entire data set regarding how we socially adapt.
We are diving into knowledge networks now, aren't we? The source material had some jaw-dropping statistics on this.
We are. A knowledge network is the invisible web of pattern ties through which individuals seek out, share, and refine expertise within a company.
Like the actual map of who talks to who.
Exactly. It's who you actually go to when you hit a roadblock, which rarely matches the official organizational chart. And the Meter study found that just the sheer attempt at applying training, not even achieving success, simply the act of trying to use a newly learned skill, meaningfully reorganized the professional networks for nearly 55% of the trainees.
That statistic is just wild to think about.
Right, nearly 55%.
We usually treat training as a one-way download of information, but you are saying it is actually a trigger for socially distributed learning.
Exactly.
Like an employee tries a new coding language, they hit a bug, so they reach out to a colleague in a different department they rarely speak to. Suddenly, ties are deepening, new channels of communication are forming.
And the structure of how the company shares information subtly shifts.
All because one person tried to cross the Rubicon. That's amazing.
Yeah, and here is the finding from their indirect effects analysis that really upends traditional management theory. When it comes to what actually drives an employee to share their new knowledge with others, peer support's effect on sharing vastly exceeds supervisor support.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I'm going to push back on that because it sounds totally counterintuitive.
Oh, absolutely. It does at first glance.
Right. The boss controls the budget, the promotions, the performance reviews. If the boss doesn't care about a new initiative, the team usually drops it. How could the coworker sitting next to me possibly have more influence on whether I share a new skill than the person writing my paycheck?
It comes down to the mechanics of social exchange theory, which the brief outlines. When you are struggling to apply a new skill, asking your boss for help carries a really high social cost.
Ah, because I'm supposed to know how to do my job.
Right. You risk signaling incompetence or admitting that you didn't fully grasp the training you were paid to attend.
Which nobody wants to do.
Exactly. But turning to a peer carries a very low social cost. Peers determine the rhythm and safety of the day-to-day environment.
That makes total sense.
When sharing knowledge with a peer involves visible reciprocal value, meaning, I help you with this software glitch today, you help me with a client escalation tomorrow, employees engage deeply.
So the fear of looking foolish in front of leadership creates a bottleneck, whereas the peer-to-peer relationship acts as a safe testing ground.
That's exactly it.
Do we have a concrete example of a company actually engineering this kind of peer support rather than just hoping it organically happens?
Yes, there's a fantastic case study in here involving a European retail bank. They were going through a massive, highly disruptive digital transformation.
Sounds stressful.
Oh, very. But instead of isolating learners, they built what they called training tandems. They intentionally paired up employees from completely different branch locations who didn't interact in their normal daily duties.
Okay, so strangers, basically.
Pretty much. And these pairs co-committed to sharing just one concrete application of the new digital training within 30 days.
Wait, their only mandate was a single application over an entire month?
Just one. But by establishing an artificial peer network with a shared low-stakes goal, they drastically reduced the social friction.
Oh, wow.
The branch managers later reported that these peer tandems generated more organic conversation, troubleshooting, and cross-pollination of ideas regarding the new digital products than any prior top-down training design the bank had ever attempted.
Just from one required application. It's a low-lift, high-reward strategy that actually leverages human psychology instead of fighting it.
Exactly.
However, I want to make sure we don't let leadership completely off the hook here. If peers are the rhythm section driving the day-to-day tempo of knowledge sharing, the supervisor still has to be the conductor who sets the tone and builds the stage, right?
Absolutely.
So how do organizations deliberately design structural channels for both transfer and sharing to thrive?
Well, supervisors are still critical, but their role shifts from enforcer to obstacle remover. Supervisors operate primarily on the transfer pathway.
Okay, how do they do that?
They do this through mechanisms like pre-training contracting. And this isn't like a formal legal document. It is a simple 10-minute conversation before the workshop even begins, where the manager and employee agree on exactly which current project the new skills will be applied to.
That's smart, giving it immediate relevance.
Right. And the ND research project followed a regional construction firm that implemented this beautifully. They provided their construction site managers with a simple one-page transfer brief.
A transfer brief?
Yes. During their standard weekly safety and toolbox meetings, the managers simply surfaced the specific application steps the returning trainees had committed to.
The brilliance there is that they didn't invent a massive new HR portal or schedule an extra hour-long meeting, which everyone hates.
Right. Nobody has time for that.
They just wove the training application directly into the toolbox memes that were already happening on the construction site.
Exactly. It anchored the learning in the existing operational reality. Trainees reported significantly more on-site conversations about the new tools, and they experienced a much clearer line of sight from the abstract classroom concepts to the muddy construction site.
Because it's suddenly right in front of them in a space they're already used to.
Yeah. But as we established earlier, while transfer can be managed this way by the supervisor, the secondary pathway knowledge sharing cannot be left to spontaneous chance.
Right.
You cannot rely on people just bumping into each other by the coffee machine. The organization has to build structural channels to guarantee that diffusion.
Because hoping for unstructured sharing is basically hoping a really good educational rumor spreads organically.
That's a great way to think of it.
Right. Like, it might happen, but it probably won't. But building structured sharing channels. So it's almost like instead of hoping for a rumor, you're building a syndication network for your brain. You're guaranteeing the broadcast of the information.
That analogy hits the nail on the head. Look at the multinational engineering firm highlighted in the research.
What did they do?
They required a structured 30-minute teach-back for any employee who completed their advanced leadership development module.
A teach-back?
Yes. Within 60 days of finishing the course, the participant was obligated to deliver a half-hour session to their immediate team, focusing on just one applied insight they found valuable.
Oh, that's brilliant.
And furthermore, the slide deck or documentation from that teach-back was then uploaded to a shared organizational library.
I love the teach-back mandate because it forces the learner to actively synthesize the information. You don't really know something until you have to teach it.
Exactly. It cements the learning.
But let's look at this from the perspective of, an executive staring at a spreadsheet. If a company implements all these great levers, peer tandems, teach-backs, toolbox integrations, how do they actually prove to the C-suite that it is working?
The measurement problem.
Right. Because if I think back to the standard post-training surveys I've taken throughout my career, they usually just ask if the instructor was dynamic, if the workbook was well printed, or if the catered lunch was satisfactory.
The industry actually refers to those as smile sheets.
Smile sheets. That's so fitting.
And the researchers argue forcefully that these superficial surveys are systematically obscuring our view of success and failure.
I can see why.
If we accept the premise that both individual transfer and network-wide sharing are vital, then evaluation systems that stop at measuring participant satisfaction on Friday afternoon are utterly failing us.
They're measuring the motivation, not the volition.
Exactly. We have to advocate for network indicators and time-lagged measurement. You cannot measure volition or persistence on the day the training ends. You must measure it 3 months and 6 months out.
Because it takes time for the employee to hit the roadblocks, push through the friction, and actually loop their peers into the solution.
Exactly. You also need multi-source assessments, which means gathering data not just from the trainee, but pulling in perspectives from their supervisor and their tandem peers.
That makes a lot of sense, getting a 360 view.
The brief strongly advocates looking at Parker's work design growth model to understand how this scales. Parker's model argues that well-designed work itself is the ultimate engine for learning.
Okay, but what does well-designed work actually mean in this context?
It means structuring jobs to include high economy, high variety, and easy access to internal experts.
Autonomy and variety.
Right. When an employee has autonomy, they aren't handed a rigid script. They are forced to test and adapt the training material to solve real problems.
And when their work has variety?
They inevitably face novel challenges that they can't solve alone, which forces them to reach out and activate that knowledge network.
Oh, so the job itself demands the sharing pathway.
Exactly. A logistics firm in the study actually dismantled their traditional, heavy, course-only approach to training. Instead, they built a continuous learning system that linked very short, formal training modules directly to those structured peer circles, supported by supervisor coaching and digital repositories.
And did it work?
The sustained behavior change in their workforce was remarkable.
But again, what is the exact mechanism for measuring that network change? How do you put a number on cross-pollination without annoying everyone with endless surveys?
The most elegant example comes from a healthcare system evaluating a clinical decision-making program. They added one brilliantly simple network question to their standard 3-month follow-up survey.
Just one question. What was it?
They asked the participants, who have you learned from on this topic since the training, and who have you taught?
Oh, wow. Who have you taught? That entirely shifts the focus from what the employee consumed to what the employee contributed.
And the resulting data was incredibly revealing. They found that the high-performing clinical units had measurably denser knowledge networks.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, the specific trainees who reported actively teaching others actually scored significantly higher on their supervisor-rated application of the core clinical skills. Teaching this skill reinforced their own mastery of it.
So the active sharing actually boosts the active transfer.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, learning culture isn't just some soft HR variable or a nice-to-have perk. It is structural strategic infrastructure.
That's a really powerful way to frame it.
It is built by what leaders systematically ask about, what behaviors get recognized in performance reviews, and what initiatives actually get resourced. When organizations intentionally design for network effects, whether that is by mixing functions, setting up cross-departmental rotations, or mandating teachbacks, they convert individual competence development into real collective competitive capability.
So what does this all mean? I want you, the listener, to pause and genuinely think about the last post-training survey you filled out at work.
Yeah, think back to it.
Did it just ask if the conference room was a comfortable temperature, or did it measure who you actively taught in the months that followed? Because if your company is only asking about the room temperature, they are almost certainly bleeding out that massive 70% of their learning investment.
Let's recap the core takeaways from the research so we can all stop that leak.
Here are the 3 non-negotiable takeaways. Number 1, individual transfer is necessary, but entirely insufficient on its own.
It's just the first path.
Right. An employee successfully applying a skill at their desk is great, but structurally requiring them to share that skill is what multiplies the value across the company.
And number two, social support, particularly from peers, is an incredibly actionable, low-cost lever. You don't need a massive software budget to pair people up in training tandems and give them a shared monthly goal.
It's practically free.
It is. And number 3, we absolutely must upgrade our measurement systems beyond immediate satisfaction.
Kill the smile sheets.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have to track the sharing pathway, and we must measure it months down the line when the real friction happens.
Which is when volition is actually tested.
Exactly. And, this raises an important question. If simply attempting to use new skills subtly reorganizes the social and knowledge network of a physical workplace, what does this mean for highly distributed or fully remote teams?
Oh, that is a huge point.
Right. How do organizations deliberately design for these vital network-altering teachback moments when employees don't share physical office space, can't read body language across a desk, and never spontaneously bump into each other at the water cooler?
That is a phenomenal question for every remote leader to chew on, especially as the landscape of work continues to evolve. We can no longer rely on serendipity. We have to purposefully engineer the water cooler into the digital architecture of our daily work.
We really do.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden mechanics of workplace training. The very next time you set out to learn something new, whether it is a complex new coding language or a simple time management framework, do not go it alone. Seek out a tandem partner. Turn that Tuesday morning reality check from a solitary struggle into a shared success. Keep learning, keep sharing, and we will catch you next time.